The Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good evening and welcome to Patrick Christys Tonight. Prepare to cut through the BS.
And the Prime Minister committed to clear that backlog in 2023, and we did that.
I have explosive revelations from a government insider that blows the lid off that. You will not believe the scale of the lies that we are being told. Nigel Farage also joins me to tee off on this, and prepare to have your pronouns checked.
Okay, is it okay if I touch it? Yeah? Okay, cool. And what are your pronouns? They, them. She, they. I'm glad we exchanged those. Yes.
We reveal that Labour looks set to turn Britain into a woke hellscape as their councils demand to check businesses' LGBTQ+ credentials before employing them. Tory firebrand Jonathan Gullis debates controversial LGBTQ+ activist Peter Tatchell on that shortly, and we crack open the Epstein files.
But you were staying at the house of
Yes.
a convicted sex offender.
It was a convenient place to stay.
Yeah, nice place to stay. Great place to stay. I will speak to the journalist who fought to get the Epstein Island flight list exposed. Talking of planes, this is every passenger's worst nightmare. Yeah, there we go, of course. We will have inside shots of a plane that burst into flames on a runway in Japan, and we will tell you exactly how everybody on that Airbus managed to get out of there alive. And can he make it to the final? 16-year-old darts prodigy Luke Litter is competing in the semi-final of the World Darts Championships right now. We will get the reaction of darts legend Bobby George. Don't miss that. On the panel tonight, it is political commentator Suzanne Evans, Tory MP Ranil Jayawardena, and journalist Rebecca Reid. Stay tuned for round one of the inside story of how you are being lied to about the asylum seeker backlog. Plus, I want to hear from you about what stories you think we should be covering on this show. If there's something happening near you that you feel needs a spotlight shone on it, please email me on the stories for Patrick at gbnews.com. That's stories for Patrick at gbnews.com. GBNews.com. We'll look into it because we've got your back. I'll see you after the headlines.
Patrick, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, our top story tonight is some breaking news for you. We can tell you Lebanon's Hezbollah says assassinating senior Hamas officials in Beirut is a serious assault on the country. Saleh al-Arori was the de facto leader of the terrorist group's military wing in the West Bank and largely held responsible for the initiation of the October the 7th attacks. He'd also had close links to Hezbollah, which has been involved in cross-border attacks on Israel's north in recent weeks. Hezbollah says it is a dangerous development in the course of the war between the enemy and axis of resistance, as they call Israel. Israel has yet to confirm any involvement in the assassination. Here at home, trains have been cancelled, power lines have been brought down, and there is widespread flooding as storm Henk barrels into the UK tonight. If you're watching on TV, look at Uphill Beach in Weston-super-Mare, where walkers were almost blown away earlier on today. Waterloo Station in London has been advising passengers against travel because of very strong winds and heavy rain across much of southern England and Wales, although some services, we understand, have been leaving the station. The Met Office has issued amber and yellow weather warnings, saying coastal areas could see gusts of up to 90 miles an hour tonight, and there is a chance of injury or loss of life from flying debris. The Home Secretary insisted today the government has cleared a backlog of migrant asylum applications as critics accuse the government of fiddling the figures. The number of asylum case decisions made last year was the highest since 2002, as the government insisted its commitment to clearing the backlog has been delivered. But Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper said the government hasn't got its facts right.
Rishi Sunak's claim to have cleared the asylum backlog is just totally false. In fact, the figures are nearly 100,000 cases, and they haven't even fully cleared the bit of the backlog they were targeting. And that's why we've still got record numbers of people in asylum hotels costing the taxpayer a total fortune.
Yvette Cooper. Well, the Prime Minister says the UK will continue to stand steadfastly by Ukraine throughout 2024. Rishi Sunak discussed providing more deliveries of lethal aid to Kyiv with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as the two leaders spoke in a telephone call tonight. Mr Sunak also offering his condolences to all Ukrainians killed and injured in Russian airstrikes over the Christmas period. The UK has committed £4.6 billion of military spending towards Ukraine's defence against the Russian invasion since 2022. And a little bit more breaking news to bring you from the last half hour. Kids Company charity founder Camila Batmanghelidjh has died at the age of 61. She became one of the UK's most known and most powerful, as well as colourful, campaigners for disadvantaged youngsters. She died peacefully, we're told, on New Year's Day, having celebrated her birthday with family and friends. In a statement, her family said Camila was dedicated to advocating for Britain's most vulnerable children. Camila Batmanghelidjh, who's died at the age of 61. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app, this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Today, the government made the bold claim that they have eradicated the legacy asylum backlog. The claim is that of the 112,138 applications subject to an initial decision in 2023, 67% were granted. They say there have been 25,550 refusals. They also claim that the number of migrant hotels has been reduced by 50. Now, I spoke to a government source today that blows the lid off this, and I can now give you an inside track on the reality of the situation. I can reveal that the advice given to the government by civil servants initially was this: have an amnesty. Give an amnesty to everyone on the backlog list and start again. The idea of having an illegal migrant amnesty is not a fantasy. The government was genuinely advised to do this. So when people are piping up now and saying that approving 67% of the asylum backlog proves that the majority of people coming across the channel are genuine asylum seekers, you have to consider that we very easily could have had a situation where every single one of them was granted an amnesty. The government could not publicly be seen to have an amnesty. the backlash would have been too large. But I can also reveal that of the 25,500 people refused asylum, it is not clear if any of them have been deported. We have requested that information from the Home Office and we are yet to hear back. What is clear is that about 17,000 people appear to have simply disappeared. Regarding the claim that taxpayers are saving money by having 50 fewer migrant hotels, I can also now reveal that my source told me this is rubbish. The vast majority of people claiming asylum are speaking little to no English and have no qualifications. They will have to be given social housing and benefits, and it is likely that they will remain in taxpayer-funded houses and benefits for a very long time. It is incredibly unlikely that many of those people will go on towards being a net benefit economically to our country. Local councils used to call the Home Office and complain about migrant hotels. Now they complain about the migrants being moved out of hotels because that means that they have to give them accommodation. What's more, so-called asylum seekers have been having children in this country whilst waiting for an asylum decision to be processed. That means that they can use their right to a family life in order to stay here. My source issued a stark warning. He said Rishi Sunak does not want to do whatever it takes to stop the boats, because if he did, it would destroy his legacy on the dinner party circuit once he stops being Prime Minister. Both he and James Cleverly appear to be ideologically opposed to leaving the ECHR. And there is a team of government lawyers and civil servants behind the scenes who cannot and will not mentally deviate from the idea that we cannot offend judges in Strasbourg. Now, this brings me on to my next set of revelations about the mindset of our Prime Minister, Home Secretary and Cabinet Ministers. The claim: they do not see huge net migration numbers as an issue at all, and they know that we cannot protect our borders whilst inside the ECHR, but don't care and are willing for us to stay there. Those allegations cut right to the very core of Britain's immigration problem, and I'm revealing more of those at 10 p.m. But to debate what we've heard so far, it's time to go to my panel. Let's get the thoughts of them. It's political commentator Suzanne Evans, former Environment Secretary Ranald Jayawardena MP, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Suzanne, I'll start with you. That claim that we have eradicated the asylum backlog appears to be lies.
Well, it's clearly not right. So what they were referring to is the historic backlog post-June 2022. And they're saying they've cleared that, which I think he has done. But there are still around 100,000 more asylum claims still in the pipeline, I gather. So the thing about this clearance today, it strikes me that this is a good example in politics of what I call the tyranny of target setting. So Rishi Sunak came up with this claim that he was going to get rid of the backlog, and he feels, I suspect, that he's had to do it by any means possible. So the spectre arises of whether, and I'm not saying this is the case because I don't know, but whether in this case those claims have been rushed through without proper checks being done.
Well, that would be an implication, given that, Ronald, we very nearly ended up with an amnesty. And I have to wonder whether or not we have essentially got one.
And Boris Johnson wanted one, let's not forget.
Well, I don't think we've got one, and I think there's been a process, but I think the fact that officials at the Home Office were suggesting that should have been the policy shows some of the problems that we're all up against. You know, the institutions that run this country are in favour of generally an open border, listen to the lefty lawyers approach. And that's the challenge that we've got to face. And, I mean, here's the truth about this. You can do whatever you want if Parliament says you can, and that includes offending the lawyers, the judges in the European Court. The trouble is that too many people, including Yvette Cooper, who comes up with these sanctimonious statements about what the last Labour government did, it's their law that have put us in the position we're in. These guys don't support any measures, including the Rwanda plan, which would be the deterrent. So it's real hypocrisy from Labour.
And clearly, now, Rebecca, what is happening is that the taxpayer is paying more for people to live in social housing and on benefits than it even was for them to be in migrant hotels.
No, they've been paying less. It's less expensive. If you clear the backlog, well, the best reason to clear the backlog, whichever side of the political spectrum you're on, is because it's cheaper to have people out of hotels and able to earn money. And yes,
but they're not able to earn money if they can't,
what you're saying about the fact they
speak English.
But there are plenty of people who do work in this country without speaking English. That is not ideal. We absolutely, if you want to live here, you should be able to speak English. We should be facilitating people being able to speak English. But it is perfectly possible to work in jobs like cleaning without speaking English. Lots of people in this country do. As soon as you give people the right to work, they are at least not being paid as much. And similarly, social housing, again, it's not ideal. There is not enough of it in this country for anybody, whether they're from here, whether they're born here or not. But it is cheaper than having people in hotels, so it is better to clear the backlog.
It's only cheaper if they can work. And Suzanne, they cannot work.
No, they can't.
If they cannot speak English and they have no qualifications.
Well, they can. They can work in the kind of black market.
Yeah, but that's what we've done today. That's essentially what has been announced today. That by clearing our way through this backlog, 67% of people. By the way, we don't know if any people have been deported at all if they have not passed the test here. We do not know that. We asked the Home Office. They have not told us whether or not anybody has.
But what's the alternative? What would be better? Like, just deport everybody and no matter who's going to go home to an unsafe country. So people from Ukraine, people from Afghanistan, people from Iran.
Oh, hang on a minute, Rebecca.
All of
these people will have had their claims assessed, and if they're genuine refugees coming from Ukraine or Iraq or wherever else it might be, then that's not an issue. But I think Patrick makes an excellent point. Why are we not being told how many people have been deported? We know that the figures have gone down. Well, Yvette Cooper, I know you mentioned Yvette Cooper and you weren't happy with what she said, but she is claiming that only 5% of Albanians, for instance, have been deported. Why is the government not being open about the numbers that they have deported? Because surely that would be a good news story for the government.
But then also, why would you not automatically clear some of it by saying, if you came from Afghanistan, you can stay. If you came from Ukraine, you can stay.
Because then you've got a blanket. There might very well be individuals who have come here and they're not necessarily...
So there have been special schemes for Afghanistan, for Hong Kong and so on. So let's cut those out of this debate. The key point here is, in terms of deportation, actually ideal should be that no one is deported because they aren't coming here illegally in the first place. And so that's why the deterrent of Rwanda or whatever else is absolutely the way forward. The Albania deal that Robert Jenrick did has actually really contributed to the 30% fall in the boat crossings. So there's more work like that required. The Rwanda deal has to get through Parliament. We've got to have as tough a piece of legislation as possible. And sadly, when you hear Yvette Cooper saying how great it was under Labour, they're the ones that set up this mess for us. And we're now trying to undo it.
And did sweet FA about it. If it's that bad, why would you leave it in place
5 years with lefty Lib Dems in coalition, sadly.
OK, so what's that? 7 of totally pure, totally undiluted power where you didn't do anything to fix what you say is the big problem.
So would you support the Rwanda deal?
No, I wouldn't.
There we
Absolutely
are.
not.
And
but I have no power to do anything.
Unfortunately, too many people in Parliament don't support it. In Theresa May's era, we didn't have a majority.
People who have no
in Theresa May's era, we didn't have a majority. In Boris Johnson's era, we had COVID. Unfortunately, this is now the time to get on and do it.
This is starting to sound like when I have to explain why I had bad GCSE results.
There is a clear plan to do it, but the left don't support it.
It's just the left haven't been in charge.
17,000 people have gone missing. This is the other aspect of this. 17,000 people. One of the ways that the government appears to have been able to now say that it's cleared a backlog is because it's lost 17,000 documents.
Yeah, where are those people? Surely they can't be that difficult to find.
I think very difficult to find because you've got no trace, no
this is very concerning.
Why wouldn't?
But like I said earlier, people who are in that position who've come here and then absconded effectively from the regular process of claiming for asylum, they're going to be working in areas that are undercover, grey market, forced labour situations.
But look,
well, they have to.
That's what I would do.
But my point is, Rebecca, if you're policing your country properly, you know where those places are operating. And you go in and you raid them and you find them and you kick them out.
What has emerged from today, from our conversation with that source, is that clearly, if there is a Labour government at the next election, the advice that is going to be given to them to get rid of the backlog is going to be to have an amnesty. Right? And that, for me, is the
same advice that was given before.
The same advice, exactly.
And they'll take it.
This is the problem.
They'll take it.
I really don't love it when we sit here and try and create crystal balls about what will happen. But if it did happen, which I'm not convinced will, because a lot of Labour voters are very anti-open borders and very anti...
Yvette Cooper isn't.
But a lot of Labour...
She's going to be in charge of the Home Office. She's going to take that advice and say, officials have told me I've got to do this.
A lot of Labour voters are much more traditional, old school, like, keep the borders tight. They've got to serve those people as well.
We know Yvette Cooper will not be listening to them because she'll be
we don't even know if it'll still be Yvette Cooper who is in charge at that point.
No, but what we really do know is that you can take this to the bank, that after the next election, whoever is in charge then, the advice from within will be to have an amnesty on asylum.
And then we have no idea how many people are going to come out of the woodwork. We're saying 17,000. It could be double that, could be treble that.
At least we would know.
And of course,
then.
it will also encourage people to come here, because you can bet your bottom dollar that they're so inefficient and so daft at this, they'll offer an amnesty, but it'll take effect in 6 months' time.
You can only have an amnesty if you
ridiculous.
completely overhaul the system. The reason they're recommending the amnesty is so they can overhaul it, right? Not so we can just do an amnesty every 10 years for the rest of forever.
Well, there was a kind of pseudo-amnesty under Tony Blair, but we'll get on to that in a little bit. Look, there's a heck of a lot still to come, because, as you can imagine, Nigel Farage's reaction to the news today that the Tory government has waved through tens of thousands of asylum claims is pretty fiery. He joins me very, very shortly. The GB News man, let's rip at the government and his old sparring partner from the European Parliament, Donald Tusk, who has shut down state media in Poland. And don't forget as well, at 10 p.m, I will have the second round of my insider revelations when it comes to what is really going on with our asylum seeker backlog. But first, it's the head-to-head, as it's revealed that the Labour Council will check LGBTQ plus credentials of businesses before giving out contracts. So will Starmer & Co turn Britain into some kind of woke hellscape? LGBT campaigner Peter Satchell and Tory MP Jonathan Gullis lock horns on that. Right after, well, it's the Great British Giveaway, isn't it? Your chance to win the latest iPhone, a shopping spree and 10 grand in cold hard cash. Make sure you don't miss it. Lines close on Friday, and here's how you can enter.
It's the final week to see how you could be the winner of the Great British Giveaway. Your chance to grab 3 amazing prizes. First, there's £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll receive a brand new iPhone 15 Pro Max. And finally, we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in your favourite store. But hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, the vouchers and £10,000 cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB01, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. this Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Up next, as it's revealed that a Labour council will check LGBT credentials of businesses before giving out contracts. Will Labour turn Britain into a woke hellscape? Peter Tatchell and Jonathan Gullis go head-to-head. It's going to kick off, don't move.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
GB News presenter and Brexit icon Nigel Farage joins me next. But first, it's time for our head-to-head. Now, here's a story you might have missed. A Labour-run council has joined the Wokerati Clubhouse after saying that they will check LGBTQ+ credentials of businesses before giving out contracts. There appears to be a growing trend of this kind of stuff infiltrating institutions, with the likes of former NatWest boss Dame Alison Rose trying to debunk Nigel Farage, Aviva CEO Amanda Blanc vetting white men to improve diversity. So tonight, I am asking, would Labour turn Britain into a woke hellscape if they were in government? Let me know your thoughts. Email us gbviews@gbnews.com. Tweet me at gbnews. While you're there, go and vote in our poll. I'll bring you the results very shortly. But to debate this now, I am joined by LGBT rights campaigner Peter Tatchell and Tory MP Jonathan Gullis. Both of you, thank you very, very much. Jonathan, your thoughts on whether or not a Labour council should be checking a business's LGBTQ+ credentials before requiring their services?
No, what council should be doing is focusing on the quality of the product or service that a business provides and then making sure that it actually is value to the taxpayer that they're serving. And actually, what I'm most disgusted by is that whilst Camden Council is busy virtue signalling as typical Labour councils do, they actually in July this year were found by the regulator for social housing to have 9,000 social homes without fire alarms, 4,000 without carbon monoxide alarms fitted too. And that was because in March of this year, they had to plead guilty in Westminster Magistrates Court to the fact that they were and pay a £500,000 fine after the death of a resident back in November 2017 because of their inability to protect and have health and safety correctly in their social housing. So it's just more of the same rubbish, woke virtue signalling nonsense that everyone's bored of. And actually what we'd rather see is local businesses backed regardless of their views on things, because ultimately I don't want to know what a view of a business is. Individuals in their spare time, that's up to them, but not for businesses as a whole.
Peter, your views on this? Is this not just a way of putting the LGBTQ+ agenda on everybody? If your business doesn't overtly back this, then you essentially lose money.
What Camden Council is doing is enforcing the law. Under the Equality Act 2010, all local authorities are required to combat discrimination and ensure equal opportunities for everyone. That includes LGBT+ people, but also women, Black and Asian people, disabled people, elderly people. Everybody has to have an equal chance under that policy. Now, the issue is not that LGBT+ people are being singled out, because they're not. The story that's published in the Telegraph is quite misleading. It's a policy for everyone, and I don't think any of your listeners would want a council to do business with a enterprise that, for example, refused to hire black people. That would be totally wrong, and that's why the equality principle has to apply across the board to everyone.
But Jonathan, I'll bring you in on this again now. Is there not essentially here the potential for this to be a slippery slope? We saw Alison rose, with NatWest looking to debank Nigel Farage for his views. We've seen the Aviva boss there having to check a white man's credentials, and now here we are with local council. I mean, is it any wonder that loads of them are going bust when they're wasting their time on this stuff?
Well, I think the concern here is that we're talking about values, and who determines whose values are right or improper. You know, we don't understand what people's values are based on their upbringing, their faith, and many other reasons. And whilst Peter's absolutely correct that the Equality Act must be applied and that we would expect councils to have a proper procurement process in place, to have this progressive idea of positive discrimination simply doesn't work. In fact, all it does is highlight the division and divide in our society. It doesn't actually therefore bring people together. So again, what I'd rather see council officers using their time effectively doing is actually checking the procurement that the business in question can supply the goods or services, are going to be of the satisfactory quality, and will deliver value to the taxpayer of the Camden Council area, just as I would expect that in Stoke-on-Trent or in Staffordshire County Council as well, where I'm proud to serve.
Peter,
so this idea, this woke nonsense really needs to be driven out. I'm so bored of businesses trying to impose values that they think they have to sign up to in order to try and keep Stonewall and other radical groups happy, which is simply just outdated.
But Peter, this is a bit like the woke mafia, isn't it? And this is why companies decide to, overtly virtue signal with things like pride flags outside them, or whether it's to do with Black Lives Matter or whatever. Is because someday a council might come knocking and say, "Can we have your services?" And you have to prove somehow that you've been overtly non-anti-LGBT, you've been overtly non-racist, etc. It traps us all in this vortex of woke horror, doesn't it?
Well, this policy is not about positive discrimination. It's not about preferencing anybody or giving them advantages. It's just ensuring that everyone who works for a supplier to a local authority has equal opportunities, that they're not discriminated against by that provider.
That's the law.
So it's the law. And it's quite right. It protects everyone. It doesn't single out any particular group for special privileges. It protects everyone. And I think everybody who is bidding for a job wants to know that their employer does not discriminate.
But how do they have to prove that, Peter?
Well, they show, for example, they have inclusive policies, equal opportunity policies.
Right, there you go. So you have to prove, right, X amount of our staff are gay, or X amount of our staff are black.
No, not X amount. It's just that they have a policy that they don't tolerate racism or discrimination against elderly people. I mean, I would find it shocking that a council did business with an enterprise that, for example, refused to hire older people. You know, some businesses have tried to have a policy of not hiring over 50s. That's discrimination against elderly people. And Camden's policy and the policy of other local authorities is designed to stop that, to ensure that people over 50 have an equal chance in the workplace.
Jonathan, do you want to just come back on all of this? I mean, I know a lot of people at the moment are seeing their council tax going through the roof, and then you see all of a sudden you've got a kind of gay pride pedestrian crossing in your neighbourhood, and the council's asking you to put things in 13 different bins and check whether or not you subscribe to an LGBTQ plus agenda.
Well, Peter talked about inclusive policies. Is inclusive policies having Labour MPs like Kate Osborne saying that she's going to block TERFs, TERFs being obviously a derogatory term to attack women who believe in women's rights and believe that a woman is a biological female? Do businesses have to therefore allow biological males into female toilets in order to tick a box so they can say that they're LGBTQIA+, I hope I've got all those correct, inclusive or not? This is the problem that we have in this day and age. It's just we're getting so caught up in nonsense like this, virtue signalling nonsense, that pleases no one but the student unions of many universities, rather than the folk that I serve in Stoke-on-Trent, North Kidsgrove and Talk, that simply want their council to collect their bins, fill the potholes, regenerate their high streets, have a good running bus service in their local area, and obviously bring and create more high-skilled, high-wage jobs locally. That's what they're interested in, not this nonsense, and Camden Council should be ashamed of themselves.
Well, can I just say that absolutely, of course, councils should seek value for money, the best possible deal for people who pay their council tax. But this is just an additional consideration. It doesn't mean that councils are going to make this the primary consideration. It's just one other consideration.
But
and of course,
it would be really interesting, though, Peter, wouldn't it? Just on that, it would be really fascinating to know whether or not this means that a council would ever do business with anyone remotely linked to the fundamentalist Islamic community, wouldn't it? Because what are the LGBT rights like there? What are the women's rights like there? But I bet that wouldn't get in the way of Camden Council doing business.
Oh, yes,
yes.
Like their policy explicitly prohibits any form of discrimination based on religion or belief. So it includes not only religious people, but atheists and non-believers. So that would be absolutely covered, and that would not be permitted. I just think this is it's a bit of a storm in a teacup. It's a bit of a culture war issue. Really, what Camden's doing is what dozens or hundreds of councils across the country have been doing for years without a fuss until this issue has been raised.
Yeah, but also people were being debanked for years without a fuss until Nigel Farage kicked off, and I think it is a massive.
That's another issue which I'm opposed to. I thought what happened to Nigel was wrong, but this is a different issue. This is about employment practices.
Final word quickly, Jonathan, as to why we don't want.
Very quickly, Sally. We're seeing other councils. So if you look at Dunbartonshire Council, I think SNP controlled. They've removed books by Israeli authors from their public libraries. If you look at Lancaster, which has got a coalition of Lib Dems, Greens and Labour, they've asked for the pension fund to not go to any businesses inside the what they call the Israeli settlements in Palestine. I mean, this is just councils virtue signalling for no one's benefit rather than focusing on delivering the services that are desperately needed to be delivered.
All right, look, both of you, thank you very much. Top stuff. That's LGBT rights campaigner Peter Tatchell, Tory MP Jonathan Gullis. Now, we reached out to Camden Council and this is what they had to say. Camden Council, like all councils, has a long-standing expectation that all companies we work with will follow law under the Equality Act. We are proud of our work on equalities and inclusion. The change we have made is to make it clear to bidders that we can reject them if there is evidence of discrimination against anyone with a protected characteristic in line with the Equality Act. Anyway, who do you agree with there? Will Labour turn Britain into a woke hellscape? Alan on Twitter says, amazingly, despite their best efforts, the Tories still aren't our worst option. Crazy times, he says. Sheila on Twitter says, yes, Labour will turn Britain into a woke hellscape, but they're only finishing the job the Tories started. Interesting, can't get around the idea that all of this started really on the Tories' watch, which is fair enough. Alan on Twitter says, absolutely, the next 5 years will be hell under Labour if they win. Well, your verdict is now in. Unsurprisingly, 90% of you agree that Labour will turn Britain into a woke hellscape. 10% of you say that they won't. But coming up in a big episode of the Royal Dispatch, Danish monarch Queen Margrethe II dropped a New Year's Eve bombshell by announcing her shock abdication on live TV. So, with Kate and William waiting in the wings and deeply popular, should King Charles do the same? Royal correspondent at The Sun, Charlie Ray, and former Labour MP Stephen Pound, they're going at it on that shortly. And we'll be taking you to darts legend Bobby George, easy for me to say, as 16-year-old sensation Luke Littler secures his place in the PDC World Final. A hero is born. But first, Rishi Sunak's government took a victory lap this morning. They announced they'd granted 50,000 new asylum applications in a bid to clear the chronic backlog. But what does Nigel Farage make of it? Well, you have to stay tuned to find out.
(2024), a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A reminder that at 10 p.m, I expose more revelations about the mindset of our Prime Minister, our Home Secretary and our Cabinet Ministers when it comes to the asylum seeker backlog and, as well, controlling our borders. You will not want to miss that. But now, serious questions remain over the government's claims that it has cleared the so-called legacy backlog of around 92,000 asylum claims. I want to know what has happened to asylum seekers who have been rejected, and if those given the green light are now receiving benefits and living in taxpayer-funded social housing. Obviously, I can also reveal that very senior and credible sources say the Home Office advised ministers to introduce an amnesty on all asylum applications in the backlog so the government could clear it. I quizzed the Home Office on those pressing issues tonight, but despite promises to get back to me, I have had radio silence, and you can read into that what you want. This is what Nigel Farage had to say, though, about the chaos when I spoke to him a little earlier. Nigel, the government says they've cleared the asylum backlog. Do you buy it?
I've just about had enough of government spin, sophistry, playing games with numbers, James Cleverly, the Home Secretary, telling us, oh, look, no one's crossed over the Christmas holidays. Aren't we doing a great job when the wind was blowing at 50 miles an hour? And now they completely overplay their hand, saying they've cleared the backlog. Already, of course, X, formerly Twitter, have picked them up for this to say, look, it's not accurate. This stuff goes back a long, long way. There are all sorts of tens of thousands missing. But of those they have formally processed, 67% of people who entered the UK through what we would call illegal routes have been allowed to stay. Compare that with 25% in France. So if the answer is, if you come, you can stay anyway, I don't call that clearing up the backlog, and I think they've actually damaged their own credibility today quite badly.
No, I was told from an inside source earlier today that just a couple of years ago, the government was told to have an amnesty for asylum seekers. Does that surprise you?
No, Boris Johnson, when he was Mayor of London, and let's face it, he was the PM until quite recently, he was actually proposing an amnesty, a mass amnesty in London for hundreds of thousands of people who'd come to the country illegally. What we learn from that all over the world is that if you do that, all you do is attract huge numbers more to come. But we're not far away from an amnesty. You know, if your chances are as high as 70% of being accepted, and even if you're rejected, you've probably got a fair chance of just disappearing off into the illegal economy. You know, we're not too far away from that situation anyway, and the country's getting tired of this. The issue is rising. This, allied to legal immigration running at record levels, is rising to the top of the agenda. And at the end of the day, it's this issue on which the red wall is going to be won or lost.
Nigel, the fact is that they can't tell us how many of the people who they've actually rejected for asylum claims have been deported. The suspicion is that they're all still in the country as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's about 25,000 people were rejected. Goodness knows where they are. Are they part of the number of people who were deported? Or does that figure represent those that have committed criminal acts and are being deported? I mean, and they're also confusing different years and different numbers and sort of asking us really to compare apples with pears. Far from cleaning everything up in our minds as to what the numbers are, there are actually more questions than answers that come out of today. And it is a government that increasingly tries to bewilder us with statistics, to use spin and sophistry. They're almost sort of repeating the Alistair Campbell method of government communications. And these days, we're a lot more cynical than we were in his day. It's not working at any level at all.
No, they're trying to snowstorm us, aren't they? Snowball us with a load of different bits of information. I think one of the biggest lies that I could detect, Nigel, was that they are saying that it's saving the taxpayers money by reducing the number of migrant hotels by 50. Of course, the fatal flaw in that statement is that now that they've approved people, that means thousands more people, 67% of people who claimed asylum during those years, who will now no doubt be in social housing and on benefits, which I reckon will probably cost the taxpayer more.
Well, yes, I mean, and where hotels have not been used, we've seen brand new apartment block developments, really quite luxurious modern homes that are now being used for asylum seekers rather than being in four-star hotels in town centres. So it all, frankly, makes very little difference. But again, it's the government playing games, expecting us to trust them and believe them, and increasingly, we just don't.
Nigel, just one more with you. Earlier on today, I spoke with a top source, formerly inside the government, who said to me that around the cabinet table, they did not view legal immigration in the hundreds of thousands, upwards of 400,000, as being a problem. They just did not personally, ideologically, view that as a problem. I'm going to have a load more of these revelations, by the way, at 10 p.m. But what do you make of that, Nigel? Presumably not a shock for you.
Not a shock at all, and you talk to Fraser Nelson, for example, who very well connected, and, there he is, the editor of The Spectator, and he's totally unconcerned by this. And they all live in London. They're based in London, most of these people. They're quite well off. They like mass immigration. You see the big multinational companies that back them and sponsor them want as much cheap labour as possible. And if you're wealthy, mass immigration's good. It keeps wages down. It's cheaper nannies and cheaper chauffeurs.
Yeah, indeed. And the other allegation is that Rishi Sunak doesn't want to do anything to leave the ECHR because he's worried that it would destroy his legacy on the dinner party circuit. Your thoughts?
I thought the Jenrick resignation was interesting for one thing. He made it clear that the government had a higher priority to the international order, such as the UN and the ECHR, than it had to delivering the demands of a clear majority of this country. That was the most interesting part of the Jenrick resignation. To expect Rishi Sunak to advocate leaving the ECHR is to have expected David Cameron to campaign to leave the EU. They are never going to do it unless electorally they're forced into it. But, we could be entering a period where the Conservatives just become a force that simply cannot be elected and maybe could be replaced in the years to come.
OK. Nigel, look, thank you very, very much for your time this evening. Tremendous to have you on the show as ever, and we'll chat again very soon. It's Nigel Farage. Yeah, it's Nigel Farage there speaking from our Westminster studio earlier today. Now, we break news for you every single day, OK? But I want to hear from you about what stories you want me to be covering on this show. If there's something happening in your area near you that you feel that needs to be highlighted and needs to have a spotlight shone on it, then please email me directly. We've got a new email address for you, OK? It's pretty simple. It's storiesforpatrick@gbnews.com. It's storiesforpatrick@gbnews.com. I will access that inbox. I will have access to it. I will read what you send in there, and I will do my best to try and shine a light on the stories that matter for you. Why? because we here at GB News have always got your back. Coming up, a Sudanese ISIS fighter, an Albanian crime boss, waved through to Britain by the government as it apparently clears the asylum backlog. Does this prove our system is totally broken and a global laughingstock? I will lay out the case for change in the law so that we can actually keep terrorists and criminals out of this country. That's at 10 p.m, along with more revelations from what really goes on inside government around that cabinet table. But next, in the Royal Dispatch, Danish monarch Queen Margrethe II dropped a New Year's Eve bombshell by announcing that she was going to abdicate on live TV. So, with Kate and William waiting in the wings, should King Charles do the same? Here, former royal correspondent at The Sun, Charlie Ray, and former Labour MP Stephen Pound. They're riled up and ready to go. That's next.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
It's time now for our Royal Dispatch. High drama. Now, imagine if King Charles went on the telly and announced out of the blue that he was stepping down as monarch. Well, that's exactly the bombshell that Denmark's Queen Margrethe II dropped on the Danish people on Sunday evening. The 83-year-old is the longest-serving sovereign in Europe, but will formally abdicate the throne, make way for her son Frederick, on January the 14th. But would such a bold and monumental decision ever be replicated again on these shores? After all, recent YouGov polling has Prince and Princess of Wales sporting a healthy 69 and 71% popularity rating amongst the British public. King Charles and Queen Camilla, they're languishing behind somewhat on 52 and 41% respectively. So, Should King Charles abdicate and make way for William and Kate? To debate this, I'm joined by former royal correspondent at The Sun, Charlie Ray, and former Labour MP, Stephen Pound. Brilliant stuff, chaps. Who to start with? I normally go ladies first, but I can't really do that tonight. Charlie, I'll go with you. Should Charles abdicate?
Of course not. Of course not. He should not abdicate. I mean, when he became king, like his late mother, he took an oath and a pledge that he would be monarch, devote his life to the monarchy for the rest of his life. And that's the way it's going to stay. We've always got people always wanting people, want William and Catherine to take over because they're young, they're cool, everybody loves them. You've just read out the polls, fantastic. But they will have to wait their turn. I know it's going to be some time. I mean, if Charles lasts as long as his mother, he's got at least another 20 years. And I don't see any reason why he should abdicate and sit at home with his pipe and slippers.
All right, Stephen, your views on whether or not Charles should abdicate?
I think it would be a wonderful thing if he did do it. I think it would save the monarchy. Now, I must admit, I'm slightly cheered by Charlie because I'm the same age as Prince Charles. He and I, the King and I, have that in common. And I'd like to think that I've got another 20 years on this earth, pottering down the allotment, going down to Fulham, but I somehow doubt it. Look, the monarchy is in a state of crisis at the present time. We've had probably the worst few years since Her Majesty, the late Her Majesty, passed on. I think, would it be a wonderful thing if King Charles actually said, look, I think it's time for a reset. I think it's time for me to step back. I've done my best. I've been a faithful and loyal servant. I've been a pilgrim for my mother. But now let's step back and let's let a new generation take over. Let's give the monarchy an injection of hope for the future. Let's give them a completely new... Let's give them a restart. Let's kickstart the monarchy for the 21st century. I don't think, Patrick, that we should actually elect the King and Queen on the basis of popularity polls.
Well, no, because we'd end up with Tony Blair, wouldn't we? But yes.
Well, it's not all bad.
Stop it, you. Charles, look, respond to that, I suppose. That if we did have Wills and Kate, then we'd get guaranteed decades with them, really. The younger, fresher face, and maybe we'd end up feeling somewhat like we did about our late Queen at some point.
Yes, that's true, Patrick. But as I say, they'll have to wait their turn. And I mean, just on the point of popularity, let's not forget that the King's Speech was the most viewed programme on Christmas Day, and the documentary, The Coronation, about the background to the coronation, was the most viewed programme on Boxing Night. So their popularity is still quite healthy. And I disagree with Stephen. I don't think the monarchy is in crisis. Crisis suggests that there could be a fall of the monarchy in the very near future, and I do not believe that will happen. I think the monarchy is just going along just nicely, and it should stay as it is.
I'm inclined to agree, genuinely. And Stephen, I wonder, there's no substitute for the decades of accumulated experience and wisdom that King Charles now has. You just can't teach that. And actually, he surely is best placed now to be our king. And we do things better than our continental brothers and sisters, don't we? We actually stick it out to the end. We don't throw the towel in.
Well, I'm not entirely sure we want to end up with sort of, Joe Biden in a crown, or it's a terrifying thought. But look, the reality is that Charlie, he knows more about this subject. He spent more hot dinners at Buckingham Palace, and I've probably had hot dinners. But the reality is that the monarchy may not be in meltdown, but it certainly is in a stage where now people are just no longer as respectful of the monarchies, and we all know the scandals that have beset the monarchy, and we know what the situation is. I think it would be absolutely wonderful if King Charles actually said, for the sake of the monarchy, for the sake of the country, never mind my own personal ambition, my experience and my age and my wisdom and all those things that people of his age and my age have, just to say, look, I'm going to step back, I'm going to let someone else have a go, and I'm going to, not because it's hard, not because it's impossible, but because we need a fresh start for the monarchy.
Very quickly, Charlie, very quickly.
Steve, just look at the scores on the doors. We've only had one abdication in this country, and that was in 1936, and it's not going to happen.
We've had one
again.
Execution in 1649.
Well, whoa. All right. Well, there we go. And yeah, exactly. And nobody here is old enough to remember either of those things, I'm sure. But anyway, that was former royal correspondent at The Sun, Charlie Ray, and former Labour MP, Stephen Pound. Thank you very, very much. Right, coming up, Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, surprise, surprise, set to be among those people named on Jeffrey Epstein's flight log. We're going to be talking about that with the person who fought to get those flight logs revealed. Stay tuned for the truth.
That warm feeling inside, from boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Storm Henk is now moving through. Wind easing and rain clearing to showers overnight, but it does stay blustery into Wednesday and the next few days. In fact, as low pressure continues to dominate, but this was Storm Henk earlier on Tuesday. It's now moving into the North Sea. The worst of the conditions then easing across the UK, but we'll see further rain across eastern England for a time. And north and east Scotland will see further persistent rain with snow for Shetland. Meanwhile, blustery showers push in to the rest of the UK. Of course, the wind keeping things frost-free overnight, except for Shetland, where we've got snow building up over the hills. And for many of us, it is a blustery start to Wednesday. Gales for the far southwest, exposed coastal parts, but the wind won't be as strong across southern parts of the UK compared with Tuesday. Those showers will make their way from west to east. In between the showers, there will be some sunny spells, but those showers will be lively, gusty winds, perhaps even some thunder and hail towards the southwest, and some longer spells of wet weather in the far north, where it will feel cold, mid-single figures here, mild in the south, 11 or 12 degrees. A bright start in the south on Thursday, but further rain turns up across the south and southwest as we go into the morning. Some sunshine clinging on across Wales, the Midlands and East Anglia into the afternoon, but for Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's cloudy with further showers. Friday sees a few showers in many places, but by Saturday, higher pressure will lead to drier weather across the UK.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
It's 10 p.m. and this is Patrick Christys Tonight. What do a foreign ISIS fanatic, an Albanian crime lord and a millionaire Egyptian all have in common? They can claim asylum in broken Britain. Prepare yourself for round 2 of my shocking revelations about the extent to which you are being lied to on illegal immigration. All of this comes from an inside source, and you will not have heard this anywhere else. Plus, we will crack open the Epstein files.
But you were staying at the house of
Yes.
a convicted sex offender.
It was a convenient place to stay.
We're about to hear from the journalist who fought to get the Epstein flight logs published. Sadiq Khan wanted to make the New Year's Eve fireworks celebration all political, didn't he? Violent crime, stabbings, rapes. We put his record as mayor up in fireworks for him. You will not want to miss that. And can he do it? Well, darts legend Bobby George reacts to 16-year-old Luke Litter trying to become darts world champion. And get this, he's just finished his sensational semi-final against Rob Cross. If you don't want to know the result, put your fingers in your ears now. I can reveal that he won. Yes, he won that semi-final in storming fashion. He plays in his Dream World Darts final tomorrow. And of course, later, my press pack, you will get all of the newest news there is as I take you through tomorrow's front pages hot off the press with my top panel, who are political commentators Suzanne Evans, Tory MP Ranil Jayawardena and journalist Rebecca Reid. Are you ready, Britain? Here we go. Get ready for the inside revelations that you will not have heard anywhere else as I expose the truth behind our broken asylum system. I'll see you after the news.
Thank you very much indeed, Patrick, and good evening to you. Well, our top story from the GB newsroom tonight is that Lebanon's terror group Hezbollah says it is now targeting Israeli soldiers after a senior Hamas official was killed by an Israeli drone strike in Beirut. Hezbollah saying killing Saleh al-Aruri, the head of Hamas's military wing, was a serious assault on Lebanon itself and a dangerous development in the course of the war. Israel hasn't yet commented officially on the attack, but an advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister described it as a surgical strike against the Hamas leadership. Well, in news here at home, trains have been cancelled this evening, power lines are down and there is widespread flooding across the UK as Storm Henk barrels into the country. If you're watching at TV, take a look at Uphill Beach in Weston-super-Mare, where walkers were almost blown away earlier as the wind came tumbling across the sands. And at Waterloo Station tonight, there were crowds as they were advised against travel because of very strong winds and heavy rain across much of southern England and Wales, although some services have been leaving the station. The Met Office issued amber and yellow weather warnings tonight, saying coastal areas could see gusts of up to 90 miles an hour, saying there is a chance of injury or loss of life from flying debris. As you've been hearing, the Home Secretary has insisted today the government has cleared its backlog of migrant asylum applications, as critics accuse the government of fiddling the figures. The number of asylum case decisions made last year was the highest since 2002, as the government insisted its commitment to clear the backlog has been delivered. But the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, says the government hasn't got its facts right.
Rishi Sunak's claim to have cleared the asylum backlog is just totally false. In fact, the figures are nearly 100,000 cases, and they haven't even fully cleared the bit of the backlog they were targeting. And that's why we've still got record numbers of people in asylum hotels costing the taxpayer a total fortune.
Yvette Cooper. Now, balloons were released tonight on Primrose Hill in London in memory of the 16-year-old boy who was murdered there on New Year's Eve. Harry Pittman was pronounced dead shortly before midnight at a viewpoint where families had gathered to watch the New Year's Eve fireworks. A male has been arrested on suspicion of murder and is in police custody. People brought flowers and balloons. And the victim's brother said he wants Harry's name to be chanted in the 16th minute of the next Tottenham Hotspur match, as he was a Spurs fan. Now, a 16-year-old is one win away from completing his dream after reaching tonight the final of the World Darts Championship. Darts phenomenon Luke Littler has tonight beaten Rob Cross 6-2 in the semi-finals at Alexandra Palace. Luke is just 19 days away from his 17th birthday and showed nerves of steel to close out the match in style as his dream darts run continued. He's the youngest player to ever reach the World Darts Championship final. Congratulations to him. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. This is Britain's news channel.
Today, I uncovered some shocking revelations about our asylum system and how our Prime Minister, Home Secretary and Cabinet Ministers are letting us down. In recent days, we have allowed a Sudanese ISIS jihadi who has broken into Britain twice and returned to Sudan on numerous occasions, to claim asylum here on the grounds that his human rights would be infringed if we deported him back home. The government, MI5 and common sense said this guy poses a national security threat and his asylum claim is bogus. But our judges said that he should stay. If the law does not allow us to deport an ISIS terrorist who has been freely travelling to the country he claims to face persecution in, who our own security services warn as a genuine threat, then clearly the law is wrong. Today I spoke to an insider who worked in broken Britain's immigration and asylum system at a high level. They told me of numerous times rapists and other violent criminals simply could not be deported under our current laws. They told me about people who flew business class from Egypt to claim asylum. What they said to me was that civil servants and government lawyers are totally obsessed with not offending judges in Strasbourg. They cannot get their heads around creating and enforcing laws that would put British interests first. But this comes from the very top, apparently. And this should be the most concerning thing for people. The allegation is that Rishi Sunak simply does not want to leave the ECHR or do anything that offends international law because that would destroy his reputation on the dinner party circuit when he leaves office. We already know our Home Secretary does not want to leave the ECHR. Are we being led by people who know what the right thing to do is, but who will not do it because they care more about their own reputation than they do about doing what's in Britain's best interests? My source also revealed daily battles with civil servants who are politicised and will always put the rights of the so-called asylum seeker before British interests. They also said that we are essentially doing battle with the EU over channel migrants. Ursula von der Leyen could stop the migrant crisis if she wanted to overnight by declaring that small boats themselves, the ones used to cross the channel, are unsafe. That would mean that every single customs officer across Europe would have to confiscate them. But she won't do it. Why not? There are massive warehouses in Germany full of small boats, and they are allowed to stay there until they are quickly dispatched to the French coast for crossings. My source also said that there are numerous times when French border authorities around Calais were blocked directly by Emmanuel Macron and his senior ministers from helping to stop channel crossings. For all of the talk of international cooperation and money to the French, that is the reality. In short, we are on our own with this. The Prime Minister has repeatedly been told that leaving the ECHR is the only way to solve the migrant crisis, or at least absolutely threatening to do so, and he is not willing to countenance it, despite what he may say publicly, nor is our Home Secretary and nor is the Attorney General. We simply cannot deport people, no matter what they've done, to a country that is deemed unsafe, and it appears that lawyers can make the case for most countries that aren't in Western Europe to be unsafe, which is why we need a third country, like Rwanda, to send people for processing. The allegation is that our Prime Minister, Home Secretary or Cabinet Ministers simply have no appetite to do what it takes to get those flights off the ground. But to respond now, I'm joined again by political commentator Suzanne Evans, former Environment Secretary Ranald Jaya-Warner MP, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. The idea there, Suzanne, that it requires a fundamental change in law to get people like a signed-up jihadi who has visited the country that he claims to now be seeking asylum from on numerous occasions out of our country. We need to change that law, don't we?
I think we do, and I think we need to change the judges as well. I mean, I'm really shocked by this. You've got these judges who seem to take a perverse enjoyment in giving amnesty to criminals, terrorists. I mean, where is the harshness in our courts? Where is the justice in our courts? Where is the common sense in our courts? The judges seem to have lost all control of it. And I think you're absolutely right when you said, you know, nobody wants to offend judges in Strasbourg. I think that applies as much to our judges as it does to politicians in government. I think the worst thing for me as well about this Sudanese terrorist is not only was this dreadful person allowed to stay in our country, the judges granted him lifelong anonymity.
Yeah.
So we have no idea who he is. He could be moving next door to any one of us next week, and none of us would be any the wiser or able to protect ourselves.
Right, is the Prime Minister too afraid of offending the dinner party set to actually do what he knows is right for Britain when it comes to leaving the ECHR?
Well, he's certainly taken forward the Rwanda
programme, despite loads of people saying that this is a terrible scheme and it won't work, whatever the left want to come out with to poo-poo it, he's taken that forward. But I think the really troublesome thing here that Suzanne rightly hits on is that here the government did the right thing with the Albanian crime boss. The government, the National Crime Agency, said, no, you are going to leave this country. But it was the judges who then said, you know what? No, we've interpreted the law differently, so we're right, you're wrong, this guy stays. And this says to me that we really need to now tighten up the law further and make clear that when it comes to matters of national security or crime prevention more generally, that really must trump these individual acts. I think you can do this stuff even without leaving the ECHR, actually. It's simply down to an act of Parliament, and it is about upsetting the Strasbourg judges. It's saying Parliament says that if national security or crime is involved...
But that's the point of what I've been told there, Steve, which is that our Prime Minister simply will not upset international laws. So, therefore, it's not going to happen, is it?
Well, I hope the Rwanda plan will happen, which also has been suggested upsets international law. That's, I guess, a start of a 10. It mustn't be the end of the road. But the principle that we must be tougher is something that the government's at least grasping in the face of stiff opposition from Labour, the Lib Dems, and basically anyone else on the left.
OK, I mean, if you take another thing that I was told today, which is that our Prime Minister says one thing in public. He's learned all of the jingles that he needs to say in order to appease the people on the right. But behind the scenes, he is just a completely different bloke. And I actually think everyone on the right can maybe just see that now.
I think there's a reason that I naturally feel quite warm towards him. I think there's a reason that of all of when the leadership debate was happening, Rishi was the one who everybody on the left felt most comfortable with. There is a sort of undercurrent of it with him that you can feel. And also I think it's quite widely accepted, certainly from people I know who work close to him, that he probably will go to America after this. And he's quite close to being a Democrat. If you look at...
There is no incentive, is there, for him whatsoever to do anything radical and sort this problem out?
And also, he has seen what happened to Donald Trump, to Ivanka Trump and her husband. They were socially shunned. They cannot get a proper reservation in New York. No one wants to be there forever.
But that's a problem for the British people, though, isn't it? That is a problem for the British people.
If what you're saying is true, Rebecca, and I've got no reason to assume it isn't, then he's not fit to be Prime Minister.
But that's the problem, and that's the point.
He's going to put his personal career first. He doesn't deserve to be in office. He shouldn't be in office. He should never have applied for the job. And this is the fundamental problem that we have in politics, is that we have people going into politics not because they want to serve the country, but because they want to serve themselves. And we see that again and again.
I completely agree, and I think the cleverest, brightest, best people, generally speaking, no offence, Randall, don't go into politics. Because it's hard work, it's thankless, it's boring a lot of the time.
Or people with a diligent sense of public duty, of course, who are willing to bang the drum for everything that's right in the world.
Job. Realistically, if you had a daughter or a son who had a top-tier education from Oxford, who was brilliant, and they said, "What should I do?" Would you not say, "Go and be a top lawyer, make $1 million a year"? Wouldn't you?
Let's just try, all right. I get what you say, but let's just try and drag it back to the matter in hand here, because really, seriously, Randall, the allegation that our Prime Minister knows that we will not stop the boats or be able to enact the kind of laws that would act as a deterrent unless we leave the ECHR. And the reason why he's not prepared to do that is because he's got one eye on what he does after his premiership. I think really does raise the question about whether or not he's fit to be in power.
Well, if that was true, I can see where you're coming from. The trouble is I just don't believe it is true. I don't believe this premise that we must leave the ECHR to stop the boats. I genuinely believe, and I know many lawyers believe, that you can stop the boats by simply asserting the will of Parliament. And that's part of what this Rwanda bill that's going through is all about. It's saying that despite the human rights law, despite what Strasbourg might say, Parliament sets the law of this country. And so I think you can do this. And I think the really important point here also is that many people said to Rishi, why have you been so clear about this? Stop the boats. It's binary. It's yes, have you done it, or no, have you not? Many people said, why haven't you just said reduce the boats? He's really clear that he wants to stop them.
Rebecca, I know you feel very strongly towards the European Union, and Ursula von der Leyen could, according to my source, just essentially stop the boats overnight by very simply declaring that they were unsafe, this particular type of boat. She won't do that. There are warehouses full of these things in Germany. We are essentially at war with the EU over small boats, are we not?
Yeah, so I don't think it's necessarily quite as simple as that, but yes, they absolutely could help. But why would they? We stuck a middle finger up at them and we wanted out. Why would any European country want to help us?
Italy's got a huge problem as well. You know, so there are many
I can see why they want to help
Greece
Italy.
has got a huge
Why would
problem.
they want to help us? What have we done for the EU?
But if by stopping people coming here, they will be reducing the pull factor that's bringing people into Italy in the first place.
I don't think viscerally it feels that way. I think it feels like we're going, well, we didn't really want to play with you, but now we kind of need your help. And I can see why they'd be like, no, sorry, get lost. I wouldn't help us.
I have to say, just destroying the small boats is not the issue, because if they declare a certain type of boat unsafe, they'll just find another kind of boat. So it's a bit of a red herring.
Fundamentally, I think the ultimate thing is that we actually really do need a Rwanda scheme. We do need a form of Rwanda scheme as a third country, because at the moment, if you've got anyone who claims to be from Afghanistan or any country that's deemed unsafe, even if they get here, even if they are illegal, even if they are a threat, we can't send them anywhere. We can't send them back home, but we could send them to Rwanda.
All you're doing is playing travel agent. It's expensive. What will eventually happen is somebody will go to Rwanda because of us, something bad will happen to them, and then they will sue for astronomical amounts of money. It is not a good... There's a reason
deterrent.
This hasn't worked for so many years.
It would be a huge
kicked down the road because it's not a good idea.
It would be a huge deterrent, as we saw with Australia.
If it's a safe country, why is it a deterrent?
If people are processed offshore, it's a deterrent. It worked in Australia, it will work here.
No,
because it's not where they want to go.
But the Australian system was basically detention centres. It was very hard.
We've just seen today, haven't we, that the vast majority of people who we've now granted asylum to under the latest round will not be speaking English, will not be getting a job anytime soon, will be living in social housing,
all
will
of which
be on
should
the
be
social.
Changed, absolutely. But playing moving around,
Make it someone else's problem.
But it's still our problem. Putting them in Rwanda is still our problem. We're still paying for it. We're still in charge of it. The buck still stops with us. It's not a good idea. It doesn't work.
But this is the trouble. The left always say nothing's a good idea, and they just have an amnesty, as we've heard from the officials today.
An ethically managed domestic processing centre would be the
Look,
ideal.
if you are... All right, thank you very much. If you are just joining us, I would urge you, once this show is finished, to go back and re-watch what was happening at the top of the 9 o'clock hour as well. You just heard there, Ronald make reference to an amnesty I revealed on this show that a source very, very close to government did tell me earlier today that the government had been advised by civil servants to have an amnesty in order to clear that migrant backlog. Does that not explain maybe what actually could happen in a year or so's time if there is a Labour government? Coming up, failed London Mayor Sadiq Khan gushes about the capital's fantastic 2023 on New Year's Eve without acknowledging surging knife crime. I went to Brixton to get the reaction of locals about their increasingly unsafe area. Don't miss the full footage of my South London adventure in my press pack shortly. But next, Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, surprise, surprise, are set to be among the 187 people identified as associates of prolific sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein when a bombshell court document is made public any hour now. I will get the latest from the murky world of the billionaire financier when I speak to Arik Fudali, a US-based lawyer representing 8 of Epstein's victims, and top investigative reporter at the Miami Herald, Ben Beda. Don't go away. Before that, it's the final week of our Great British Giveaway. Your chance to win the latest iPhone, a shopping spree, 10 grand in cold hard cash. Start 2024 right. Lines close on Friday. Here's how you can enter.
Make sure you don't miss your chance to win 3 brilliant prizes in our Great British Giveaway. Prizes which could make your new year start with a bang. There's a totally tax-free £10,000 cash to be won. Cash to spend however you like. What would you do with it? We'll also send you on a New Year shopping spree with £500 of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. And if all of that wasn't enough, you'll also get a brand new iPhone 15 Pro Max. But hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, the vouchers and £10,000 cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB01, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. this Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Well, come on, what are you waiting for? Enter now. Coming up, after a Japan Airlines flight burst into flames at Tokyo Airport following a collision with a small plane, I will show you footage from inside that plane as all 367 passengers in the Airbus miraculously survived. But how did they survive? I will tell you. Don't go anywhere, though. We are back in just a couple of moments.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Now, before the break, I showed you the terrifying footage of the Japan Airlines flight that became an inferno after colliding with a small Coast Guard plane, killing all 5 crew. But, amazingly, all 379 passengers and crew on board that commercial plane from Sapporo, a city in the northern Japanese island of Hokkaido, had a miraculous escape as it became engulfed in flames. I promised you that we would show you some footage from inside that plane seconds before disaster. We've got hold of it. Here it is. Oh my gosh, honestly. And then obviously it resulted in all of that. Well, amazingly, all 379 passengers and crew were evacuated from the plane before it was fully engulfed in flames. Public broadcaster NHK reported that 14 people were injured, and apparently the main reason, seriously, that they were able to get off and all survive so quickly was simply that, as part of Japanese culture, it is standard stuff to just follow orders from authority figures. And so whilst we might be sitting there with our headphones in, not listening to where your nearest exits are, not knowing what to do, or wrestling with our bags from the top shelf in order to get out and blocking the aisles, in Japan, they were straight off. And that is essentially why they were all able to survive. So, moving on, though, talking of aeroplanes in a way, the likes of Prince Andrew and Bill Clinton are expected to be named on the long-awaited list of people who are associated with prolific sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. When its release is in the coming days, a judge ordered the publication of the bombshell court documents from a lawsuit linked to Epstein's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, with 187 people set to be dramatically identified. Well, former US President Clinton is reportedly mentioned 50 times, according to ABC News in America. He travelled on Epstein's plane on humanitarian trips to Africa in the early 2000s, and at that time praised Epstein as a committed philanthropist. There is no suggestion he was involved in illegality. But we are potentially hours, moments away from this long-awaited list being revealed. And to join us now to discuss this is Eric Fudal, lawyer for 8 of the man's victims, and Miami Herald investigative reporter Ben Vida. Both of you, thank you very much. Ben, can I just start with you, if that's OK? Because as I understand it, it is the Miami Herald that have managed to get us to this point, right? Is it you guys who really banged the drum to get this stuff revealed? I mean, what happened there? What can we expect?
Yeah, the Miami Herald has been fighting since 2018 for these documents to be released. We've had great lawyers that we've hired who have continued to make the argument that this should be released. This should never have been secret in the first place. This is an episode, when you go back to Epstein's crimes, that has been shrouded in secrecy from the beginning. And we have argued, and judges have agreed with us, that this material should be in the public record. I mean, this is how the court system in the U.S. works. We have a public court system. We don't keep things secret, and we don't have a court system, or shouldn't have a court system, where wealthy people can hide their secrets because they can afford to hire lawyers that fight to keep things secret.
But Eric, why is this so important? Why should Sally from number 42 somewhere in Doncaster here in Britain care about the Epstein files?
Well, what's interesting to me is what people forget is that Jeffrey Epstein was convicted and had a plea deal for procuring sex with a minor in 2008. And a lot of the names that we've known to be publicly associated with Jeffrey Epstein all took place before 2008. So what I'm interested to see, and why perhaps anyone should be interested to see, is who remained associated with Jeffrey Epstein after he was publicly part of a plea deal involving sex with a minor. That's what's interesting, because that was not confidential. People knew about that conviction in 2008, knew about that sweetheart plea deal that had to do with sex with a minor. So what I want to know is which one of these high-profile figures remained in contact, remained associated with him after that.
Ben, can I ask, have you guys at the Miami Herald, or you, actually had sight at all of this list? Have you got any idea how deep this runs, or what we can expect?
The names on this particular list, no, but we've had a number of releases up till now. This is the 3rd or 4th release of documents from this lawsuit. And certainly, when you think about some of the people who have been released before, you're talking about major U.S. politicians, one of the former top-ranking senators in the U.S. Senate, former governor of New Mexico, the chairman of Hyatt Hotels, Tom Pritzker. These are some of the names that have been in previous documents. And we anticipate that we'll see, similarly big names this time around. And obviously in the UK, the biggest name is Prince Andrew. And while there has already been quite a bit released about Prince Andrew, there was obviously the lawsuit a couple of years ago brought by Virginia Giuffre, who is whose case this is, where these documents are being released. There's still always kind of an infinite amount of interest in exactly what Prince Andrew's relationship was with Jeffrey Epstein, to the point about his continued association with him after it was very clear that Epstein had been not just accused but convicted of sexually abusing underage women. Those are the kinds of revelations that we're looking for sure.
Yeah, there's certainly questions to be asked. And I want to make it very clear, I'm not including Prince Andrew in what I'm about to ask now, Eric, and obviously every single person who's even been remotely linked to this remains massively innocent until proven guilty. But, Eric, it was long the time of kind of tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists, I think, to assume that there was some kind of global elitist paedophile ring, right? Do you wonder whether or not the revelations of the Epstein files might actually make that true?
Well, I certainly don't blame the public and, some skeptical members of the public for assuming that, right? Jeffrey Epstein killed himself under very suspicious conditions. He certainly should not have been able to do that under the confine that he was in. So I don't blame the public. And also based on the really high profile, prolific names that we've already seen associated with Jeffrey Epstein. So I'm not surprised people assume that or people suggest that. What people don't realize, though, as someone who's represented a lot of victims of Epstein, is that this sex trafficking ring really was to the benefit of Jeffrey Epstein. He was having multiple young women come to his place every single day for decades. So people assume they see all these victims that there must have been this ring, when in fact it was Jeffrey Epstein who was doing the sex trafficking for himself.
Interesting. Ben, just final word to you, if that's all right. So where are we up to in terms of the release of this stuff? Because my understanding is that it was until midnight New York time yesterday, which I think is about 5 in the morning our time, so that was 5 o'clock this morning here, to launch appeals against this. So really, we were kind of expecting this list to be out now-ish, really. What do you think?
I think because of the holiday, there was a little bit of an extra time, but our expectation is that either, by the end of today, U.S. time, or certainly tomorrow, we'll be seeing these documents. I think, the latest I had heard was that there were 2 parties that had the right to potentially appeal, but that some of the documents could be released even if they were to appeal. That wouldn't necessarily mean that nothing would mean that some of the documents might be put on hold until later.
All right, watch this space, watch this space. Look, both of you, thank you very much. I will chat to you again very soon, no doubt. That is Eric Fidel there, who is the lawyer for 8 of Epstein's victims, and Miami Herald investigative reporter, a man who fought to get these files out there. Ben Vida, like I said, we are potentially just moments away from that infamous Epstein list being made public. But coming up in the second part of my press pack, failed London Mayor Sadiq Khan was widely mocked for his narcissistic fireworks display on New Year's Eve in what's being dubbed the wokest display ever. But I will show you my alternative version, Sadiq Khan's biggest failures. But next, I'm about to show you the full clip from my visit to Brixton in South London, where I asked locals whether or not they thought that surging knife crime under Sadiq Khan was actually bad, who had the gall to say in 2023 that it was a great year for the capital city. Don't miss that.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camila Batmanghelidjh Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. It's time to bring you tomorrow's news tonight now in the most entertaining paper review anywhere on the telly. The very first front pages have just been delivered for my press pack, so we go to the Metro first, and they are leading off with that giant picture of the towering inferno. We escaped from hell. That was about an Air 379 people in an Airbus inferno miracle. We brought you footage from inside that plane earlier on. Let's go over to the Independent now. Same picture story, but just underneath it, Sunak accused of barefaced lie on asylum backlog. The PM is under fire for false immigration claim. We gave you a couple of whopping great big exclusives here earlier on the exact nature of what I am calling a lie when it comes to the asylum seeker backlog. Feel free to go back and check that out. Israel assassinates, in The Guardian, Israel assassinates senior Hamas leader. I believe we go to the I next, actually. Apologies, sorry. We'll go to the I next. Yeah, there we go. 2024 mortgage price war begins as lenders slash interest rates. So that's the story leading on the I. They've also got a bullseye. 16-year-old Luke Litter goes for world title tonight. Well, he's in the final. We speak to Darts legend Bobby George shortly. We'll move on now to The Guardian. Yeah, there we go. Israel assassinates senior Hamas leader in Lebanon. They go for Starmer to set out plan to clean up politics. And we finish with the Mail. Again, giant picture there of that towering inferno of a plane on a Japanese runway. But this is a story I'm focusing in with on the panel now. As the longest ever NHS doctor strike begins, Mail exposes bloated pay of bosses at hospitals with worst waiting times. Curb the NHS fat cats on £300,000. I am joined by Suzanne Evans, Ronald Giles Wardner and Rebecca Reid. Suzanne, I'll start with you. Is it time the NHS looked inwardly at itself?
Oh, my gosh, it's long overdue, isn't it? I mean, what incenses me about this, it's not just the headline about the huge amounts of pay that these people are on, double that of the Prime Minister. I can't believe most NHS Trust CEOs have got double the weight of job than the Prime Minister has. But it's the fact this pay is not performance related. And so the Mail has exposed the fact that the 11 worst trusts for waiting times and treatment referrals are all got CEOs on over 175 grand a year. This pay should be performance related.
We've got Derbyshire Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust largely dealing with mental health referrals, so that's urgent, right, very urgent. They had the longest average wait at a year and 16 weeks. Carolyn Green, interim chief until April, received a total pay package, including pension, of £235,000. Should the doctors on strike not be angry at them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is... first of all, I should say that if someone's performing really well, I think, yeah, fine, pay them what they deserve. And if you're getting the right people into the health service to run it properly, great stuff. But the problem here, as Suzanne rightly says, is where there is failure, they're being rewarded for it, and no one can do anything about it. That's, totally lacking accountability. And it's not just these roles, is it? I mean, it's all these diversity roles that are hired, almost £14 million being spent on well over 300 diversity roles across the NHS. This is taxpayers' money. We're spending more in the NHS less than ever before, including for inflation, and yet it's not being spent well. That's what really infuriates people.
Yeah, I mean, Rebecca, how on earth can, you know, junior doctors justify striking over this when, you know, they've got some of the NHS budget being wasted on these fat cats?
Well, the junior doctors don't set the NHS budget, so I'd imagine they probably would also agree that this was a mad thing. I don't think many junior doctors would say, yes, the person in charge of the bad infrastructure and the poorly run hospitals deserves this much money. I agree with everybody else. I would be fine paying 300 grand if they were getting somebody amazing in. And I think if you're going to get people from the private sector who are going to do an incredible job, you have to pay that much money. But it should be basically entirely bonus. They should get the same base salary as a junior doctor with the bonus capacity to get 300k.
All right, yeah, junior doctor strikes tomorrow again for a week. I will be turning up to one of those junior doctor strikes tomorrow to have a chat with them, so tomorrow's show obviously will be a bit lively. But Sadiq Khan reckons that 2023 was a sterling year for London, but he failed to acknowledge the spiralling knife crime taking place under his watch, with knife point robberies up a third. So this is what happened when I spoke to locals in Brixton in South London earlier today, one of the capital's worst areas for knife crime, to see how they felt about some of the claims made by our mayor.
Talk about knife crime. Yeah. Kids stabbing each other, walking around with swords.
I'm a father of teenagers, so when you see it happen or when you hear it on the news, it makes you wonder if your child is safe out there.
I don't think it's getting worse.
You don't think it's getting worse?
No.
Just a few weeks ago, there was a young man who died up the road there, and we went for visual, so everyone is affected, whether directly or indirectly.
Do you think most people around here know someone who's been a victim of knife crime?
Yes, like I said, yes, loads of us. Every minute there's a parent crying. No, man, and there's nothing we can do.
Well, it's interesting, though, isn't it, to speak to actual people on the ground. The vast majority of them, in fact, almost everyone I spoke to, said they knew somebody who had been a victim of knife crime, which indicates the problem is not getting better. The New Year's Eve fireworks display in London, though, has sparked some controversy. Yep, surprise, surprise, London's failing mayor, Sadiq Khan, couldn't resist turning the whole thing into a giant vanity project. Messages like, London is a place for everyone. There we go. Well, of course, Khan's ego meant that the nation's fireworks display kicks off with the message, the Mayor of London presents. So I thought today I'd bring you the reality of what he's really presenting. The Mayor of London presents a rising violent crime rate. There we go, up 2.1%. Fantastic, thank you very much. The Mayor of London presents a city plagued by knife crime that is rising at the highest rate in 5 years. The Mayor of London presents a lawless capital where robberies at knife point have risen by more than 2/3. The Mayor of London presents a ULEZ tax that has pilfered more than 480 million quid from hard-working Brits since 2021. And, of course, the Mayor of London presents a woke and vain New Year's Eve fireworks display that was roughly equivalent to a car driving 600 kilometres. There we are. Despite declaring an eco-war on motorists. Well, there we go. And, of course, in this interview on Sky News, it's gone viral, Sadiq Khan dodged questions about knife crime. We can take a little look.
Why is London doing so badly on knife crime and knife robberies?
It's actually the biggest personal robbery is of mobile phones.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's the use of knives I'm talking about, not mobile phones. It's the use of knives.
Yeah, but sure, but that's because they're trying to steal the mobile phones.
Yeah, well, it was interesting that he wasn't particularly equipped for that. Mobile phones are now to blame. Look, when I come back, I am going to be talking about 16-year-old British dart sensation Luke Littler, who is remarkably through to the World Darts Championship final after beating another darts player, of course, whose name I've forgotten. But anyway, Bobby George is joining me, the darts sensation himself, very, very shortly. And we'll have more front pages with my panel and their greatest Britain and Union Jackass. Stay tuned, don't go anywhere. I'm not a darts fan.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Coming up, a brave British safari guide is up for a prize in tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass after being saved from death on a croc-infested river. Well, we'll show you a little clip of that shortly. But next, it's going to be the second part of my press pack when I reveal even more front pages. However, I do want to get some reaction. Live reaction to 16-year-old British darts sensation Luke Littler, who is through to the World Darts Championship final after beating 2018 champion Cross 6-2 to reach the final. I'm delighted to be joined by TV presenter and darts legend Bobby George. Bobby, thank you very, very much for coming on the show. So this is remarkable, isn't it? We have got a 16-year-old sporting hero who loves a kebab, and he's in the final. Can he win?
Well, the way he played tonight, yeah, he played excellent really tonight. He had 106 average, which is, over that sort of race, is very, very good standard. He went out 142 in one set, 149, 132. He was unbelievable. He played absolutely marvellous tonight to reach the final. So he can win, playing like that. He can win.
Have you ever seen anyone this good at 16, Bobby?
Well, 16, I mean, I think he looks a bit older than 16. I did. But 16 years, he's been playing since he had a nappy on, he reckons. So he practices all the time. His whole life has been darts. So he's got his dream. He's no mate. He didn't just walk in to the PDC World Darts. He was actually the junior world champion. So he is a world champion. He's played at the World Darts Association. He's played a lot of darts for a young man who's only 16, and he's in the final. He deserves to be in the final because he's pretty good.
Just last one with you, Bobby, is my concern is that at 16 years old, he's now going to be a massive superstar. He's going to have loads of money. Could he implode mentally, do you think?
Well, that's one thing he's got to do. He's got to keep his feet on the ground. He can't listen to people, do this, why didn't you do that? All he's got to do is play the game. Just play as he's playing. If he wins, he gets the piece of money, right? 500 grand, which is good, isn't it? Good bit of piece of money. But he's got to keep his feet on the ground to make sure he doesn't get too big-headed, a bit cocky, and then gets knocked off the perch. And you've got to be very careful with a young man with that sort of money.
And spend his money wisely. Bobby, thank you very much. That is darts legend Bobby George there, reacting to a British hero being born in front of our eyes here, isn't it, Luke Littler? Now, let's return to that paper review, because I've got some more front pages for you right now. Daily Express, 6-day junior doctors' strike is an act of cruelty. We go to the Times, million cancellations for patients in doctors' strikes. Exactly, yeah, they're really focusing in on that, aren't they? The Daily Telegraph, Israel kills top Hamas leader in Beirut. Channel crossings to increase this year despite the government's pledge. Bit on mortgages there. The Mirror is in here. Why still no justice? More than 20 years ago, a witch hunt started. Innocent people were hounded. And this is, of course, about the sub-postmasters Scandal. So there we are. Yes, I'm just going to reintroduce my panel to the fray now. Suzanne Evans, Ryan Giles-Wardner and Rebecca Reid. I mean, I'm going to start, I think, now when it comes to what's maybe on the front of the mirror as well, about this sub-postmasters strike here. I mean, this is... Can you remind us a little bit, Suzanne, about what this was about? I mean, it's post office workers wrongly accused in the IT scandal are still waiting for payouts.
Yeah, there was a new IT system called Horizon that was put into post offices, and there was a fault in it. And the fault basically was an accounting error, and it made it look like sub-postmasters and mistresses were fiddling and cheating and stealing. And a blind eye was turned to this for far too long. Some of them went to prison, some of them died, some of them had divorce, family breakup, got very ill. A horrific scandal to be accused of basically thieving when you weren't. Absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, and Ronald, I mean, surely they deserve the money now, do they?
Yeah, you know, I've got a constituent involved in this as well, and you know, this is something that the post office sort of operated as this island, no accountability, no scrutiny. Ministers like, say, Davey, now leader of the Liberal Democrats, presided over it and did nothing about it.
Can I just go a little bit off piece with you, if that's all right, and talk a bit about Luke Littler?
OK, yeah.
Right, because there is a photograph that emerged earlier on, which was of Luke Littler and apparently his apparent girlfriend, who is, bear in mind, this guy's 16. He looks about 35, right?
But he is
16.
not 35, he is 16.
And his girlfriend, as we understand it, is...
21.
21. And you think that's a problem?
Yeah, and so we were chatting about it a little bit earlier, and somebody said, oh, imagine if it was the other way around. And absolutely, the other way around would be awful, but this is still awful. Just because he's a boy does not mean it's acceptable. If you are an adult, you have no business dating somebody who is technically a child.
I mean,
inexplicable to me.
I mean, he looks and acts like he's middle-aged.
We don't know how old he acts, but he is 16. I don't care how grown up he seems. And so many young women will tell you they've had older men be like, oh, you're very mature for your age. It's a very easy thing to say someone acts grown up when you want them to be a grown up because you're dating them because they're not a grown up.
I feel sorry for this guy. You know, he's gone out just throwing darts at a darts board. Now all of a sudden everyone's prying into his personal life and all that.
What GCSEs to do, and his girlfriend could literally like buy a house and be in the army.
You know, it's legal. That's what you can't get around. It's legal, and also 6 years is not a big age gap. OK, 16 and 21 sounds huge.
24 and 30.
It doesn't sound so big, you know, 51 and whatever, 67.
Well, this is it. Let it run a bit and it's a completely normal relationship. So there we go.
Sure, but...
All right, it's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain Union jackass. And we go with Suzanne for your greatest Britain first.
So my greatest Britain is British safari guide Mike Turner, who, after getting stuck on a flooded bridge in South Africa's Kruger National Park, clung to the roof of his truck in the crocodile-infested river for 15 hours before being rescued. What a hero bloke.
We've got a clip. Hero, in a way. All right, Ronald, your greatest Britain?
He perhaps can't compete with that, but Paul Scully, a Member of Parliament, a friend of mine, who was the minister who actually kicked off the inquiry and exposed the scandal within government. He refused to listen to what the Post Office were telling him and said that a new light must be shone on it.
Oh, good for him. Mine, I would actually probably now join Randall because I think that's an amazing thing to have done. But mine is Rachel Reeves, who said that she would appoint a COVID corruption commissioner to try and get back all of the taxpayers' money that was wasted.
OK, and today's greatest Britain is, drumroll please, let's bring it up, Mike Turner, the bloke who arguably should not have been greatest Britain ahead of Paul Scully, but has been anyway for clinging on to a problem of his own making. Anyway, I'm going to get Suzanne, who's your union jackass.
He could have just as well been jackass for not following his sat-nav. But anyway, it's Sadiq Khan for once again turning the New Year's Eve fireworks display into a woke fest of praise for himself.
Very quickly.
Ed Davey, who was the Post Office Minister when the problems first came to light, and he sidestepped all scrutiny over his role handling these complaints.
OK, go on.
Mine is Miriam Cates, a working parent who is complaining that Labour is offering too much potential childcare for working parents.
OK, all right, and today's winner is Sir Ed Davey. There we go. There we are. Yeah, Sir Ed Davey. It's about time someone nominates him for Union Jackass. Right, thank you very much, my wonderful panel. I have thoroughly enjoyed this evening. Please do go back and watch us on Catch Up and on YouTube as well. Some startling revelations from an inside source about the way that you're being lied to about our asylum backlog. Don't miss that. GB News, place to be.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Storm Henk is now moving through. Wind easing and rain clearing to showers overnight, but it does stay blustery into Wednesday and the next few days, in fact, as low pressure continues to dominate. But this was Storm Henk earlier on Tuesday. It's now moving into the North Sea. The worst of the conditions then easing across the UK, but we'll see further rain across eastern England for a time. And north and east Scotland will see further persistent rain with snow for Shetland. Meanwhile, blustery showers push in to the rest of the UK. Of course, the wind keeping things frost-free overnight, except for Shetland, where